On July 15, 1799, soldiers repairing a fort near the Egyptian town of Rashid pulled a broken slab of dark stone from an old wall. It was not made of gold. It did not come from a royal tomb. The text carved across its damaged surface was a priestly decree issued in 196 BCE, during the reign of Ptolemy V. Yet that ordinary administrative document became one of the most consequential objects ever recovered from the ancient world. The Rosetta Stone carried essentially the same message in three scripts: Greek, Demotic, and Egyptian hieroglyphs. Scholars could read the Greek. The hieroglyphs had been silent for more than 1,000 years. The stone therefore offered something archaeology rarely provides, not simply an object from the past, but a bridge between a known language and a lost one. The breakthrough was not instantaneous. Thomas Young demonstrated that some symbols recorded sounds, particularly in royal names. Jean-François Champollion went further, drawing on the Rosetta text, other inscriptions, and his knowledge of Coptic. He realized that hieroglyphs were a flexible writing system, combining phonetic and symbolic signs. On September 27, 1822, he publicly presented the argument that opened ancient Egyptian writing to systematic reading. The result was larger than the translation of a single monument. Temple walls, funerary texts, tax records, letters, royal decrees, and private prayers could now be studied as language rather than decoration. Egypt was no longer known mainly through Greek and Roman observers, biblical references, or later legend. Ancient Egyptians could increasingly be heard through records they had created themselves. That is the standard for the discoveries in this documentary. The greatest archaeological finds are not always the richest or the most visually spectacular. They are the finds that force history to be rewritten. Some recover a lost voice. Some preserve an ordinary day. Some reveal that people dismissed as primitive were artists, engineers, or relatives. And some show that entire landscapes were more crowded, connected, and politically complex than anyone had imagined. The Roman city preserved by catastrophe. In AD 79, Mount Vesuvius buried Pompeii beneath volcanic ash and debris, while pyroclastic surges overwhelmed nearby Herculaneum. The eruption killed residents who had not escaped, destroyed communities around the volcano, and ended the lives recorded in houses, streets, workshops, and public buildings. Yet the same disaster also preserved a body of evidence with almost no equivalent in the Roman world. People had encountered buried remains in the region before modern archaeology began, but organized urban excavations at Pompeii started in 1748. Early tunneling often treated the site as a source of paintings, sculpture, and valuable objects. Over time, methods changed. Excavators began to expose streets and buildings as parts of an urban system rather than as containers of treasure. Pompeii became a laboratory in which archaeology itself evolved. 1. What emerged was not simply a collection of elite monuments. The city preserved bakeries with mills and ovens, shops with counters, bath complexes, taverns, houses under repair, political advertisements, insults, love notes, religious shrines, storage jars, gardens, and traces of food. At Herculaneum, carbonized wood, furniture, foodstuffs, wax tablets, and papyrus scrolls survived under different volcanic conditions. Together, the Vesuvian sites made the Roman world intensely human. Written histories tend to follow emperors, wars, and institutions. Pompeii offered the scale of the street. Graffiti revealed political campaigning and private conflict. Buildings showed how domestic space was used to display status, conduct business, worship household gods, and manage enslaved labor. human remains. And later plaster casts made the catastrophe personal, although modern research also warns against turning victims into theatrical props detached from their lives. The discovery changed more than knowledge of Rome. It influenced European art, architecture, tourism, conservation, and the public image of archaeology. It also created a permanent tension. Excavation reveals a site, but exposure accelerates decay. Every wall uncovered becomes a responsibility. Pompeii, therefore, transformed archaeology twice, first by showing how completely a lost city could be reconstructed, and then by demonstrating that discovery without conservation can become another form of destruction. The painting's experts refused to believe. In 1879, Marcelino Sanz de Sacciuola examined the ceiling of Altamira cave in northern Spain after his young daughter drew attention to painted animals overhead. Across the rock were bison and other figures, rendered with confident lines, natural contours, and mineral pigments. Sacciuola argued that the paintings belonged to the Paleolithic period. Many leading scholars rejected him. Their objection was not based only on missing dates. It came from a deeper assumption about human progress. European prehistory was often imagined as a crude stage in which survival left little room for sophisticated art or symbolic thought. Altamira's images looked too skillful. Critics suggested that they were modern, misunderstood, or fraudulent. Sacciuola died before the scientific community broadly accepted that he had been right. The reversal came as comparable decorated caves were identified elsewhere, often sealed beneath ancient deposits. By 1902, prominent skeptics publicly acknowledged the mistake. Altamira was no longer an impossible exception. It became central evidence that Upper Paleolithic people possessed complex visual traditions, technical knowledge, memory, and symbolic worlds. The paintings were not casual doodles. Artists used charcoal and ochre, engraved lines, exploited the natural shape of rock, and sometimes placed images deep inside cave systems where artificial light was required. The meaning of these spaces remains debated. They may have involved ritual, storytelling, teaching, identity, altered states, or meanings that do not fit modern categories. Archaeology can establish materials, sequence, and context more securely than it can recover the exact thought behind an image. Altamira changed history because the controversy exposed the assumptions scholars carried into the evidence. The cave did not merely add art to the Paleolithic. It challenged a hierarchy in which ancient hunter-gatherers were permitted tools but denied imagination. Once the paintings were accepted, prehistory could no longer be described as a long intellectual darkness before civilization. Human beings had been creating powerful symbolic worlds tens of thousands of years before writing. 2. The bones that revealed another humanity. In 1856, quarry workers in Germany's Neander Valley uncovered bones from a small cave. The remains included part of a skull with a heavy brow, thick limb bones, and other features that did not fit comfortably within the human variation recognized at the time. Earlier Neanderthal remains had been found in Belgium and Gibraltar, but they had not been identified as belonging to a distinct ancient population. The Neander Valley skeleton forced the question into public view. The timing made the find explosive. Europe was debating geological deep time, extinction, and the origin of species. Some researchers argued that the bones belonged to a diseased modern human. Others recognized an ancient form of humanity. In 1864, the name Homo neanderthalensis was proposed. For the first time, science had formally identified an extinct human group. The discovery did not immediately produce an accurate portrait. Neanderthals were frequently reconstructed as stooped, brutish, and mentally inferior. Those images reflected both limited evidence and a cultural desire to place modern humans at the peak of a simple ladder. Later discoveries dismantled that caricature. Neanderthals made sophisticated tools, controlled fire, hunted large animals, cared for injured group members, used pigments, and behaved in ways that resist the old division between civilized us and primitive them. The greatest revision came from ancient DNA. In 2010, researchers led by Svante Pääbo published a draft Neanderthal genome and showed that Neanderthals and the ancestors of many living people had interbred. Neanderthals were not a failed side branch completely separate from modern humanity. Part of their genetic inheritance survives in people today, with effects that can involve immunity and physiology. The bones from the Neander Valley therefore changed the meaning of the word human. They opened paleoanthropology, challenged literal and linear accounts of human origins, and eventually revealed a family history shaped by migration, contact, and mixture. The question was no longer simply what happened to Neanderthals. It became how much of them remained within us. The tomb that became a global event. On November 4, 1922, Howard Carter's excavation team uncovered the top step of a staircase in Egypt's Valley of the Kings. The following day, a sealed doorway appeared. Carter had spent years searching for the tomb of Tutankhamun, a relatively obscure young pharaoh of the 18th dynasty. By November 26, after Lord Carnarvon arrived, Carter opened a small breach and looked into an antechamber crowded with objects that had remained largely undisturbed for more than 3,000 years. The tomb was not the largest royal burial in the valley, and it had been entered in antiquity. Its historical power came from preservation. For chambers contained shrines, coffins, chariots, furniture, clothing, weapons, jewelry, food, ritual equipment, and the king's mummy. The objects formed an archaeological context rather than an isolated collection. They showed how royal burial ideology was translated into materials, labor, craftsmanship, and ceremony. The excavation also demonstrated the value of documentation. Photographer Harry Burton recorded rooms and objects before they were moved. Carter's team produced notes, drawings, object cards, conservation records, and plans during a process that lasted roughly a decade. The work was not flawless by modern standards, but its archive allows researchers to reconstruct the excavation in extraordinary detail. Tutankhamun's tomb transformed the public scale of archaeology. Newspapers turned the opening into an international drama. Egyptian-inspired design spread through popular culture. Stories of a mummy's curse flourished after Carnarvon's death, even though the supernatural narrative was built from coincidence. 3. Exaggeration and journalism rather than evidence. The spectacle sometimes overwhelmed the more important story, an ancient burial assembled by Egyptian workers and artists, uncovered during a period when Egypt was asserting political independence and control over its heritage. The find changed Egyptology by preserving a royal funerary assemblage almost intact. It changed archaeology by proving the worldwide power of a carefully staged discovery. And it raised questions that still matter: who controls an excavation? Who tells its story? When does public fascination support preservation, and when does it reduce a human past to treasure and myth? If you value evidence-led documentaries that keep the mystery without sacrificing the facts, this is a good moment to subscribe. The library hidden in desert caves. In 1947, members of the Ta'amira Bedouin community found ancient scrolls in a cave near the northwestern shore of the Dead Sea. The exact details of the first discovery vary in later accounts, but 7 scrolls emerged from the cave and passed through antiquities dealers, religious authorities, and scholars. Once their age and importance were recognized, the discovery triggered searches across the cliffs near Qumran. Between 1947 and 1956, Bedouin searchers and archaeologists recovered manuscripts and fragments from 11 caves in the Qumran area. The collection eventually represented more than 900 texts, written mainly in Hebrew and Aramaic, with some Greek. It included biblical manuscripts, legal texts, hymns, commentaries, community rules, apocalyptic works, and writings previously unknown. The Dead Sea Scrolls changed the study of the Hebrew Bible because they included copies of biblical books roughly 1,000 years older than the medieval manuscripts that had previously formed the main basis for the Hebrew text. Comparison revealed both remarkable continuity and meaningful variation. Ancient scripture was not transmitted through one perfectly uniform line. Different textual forms circulated, were copied, and sometimes developed before later traditions became standardized. The scrolls also complicated the religious world of the Second Temple period. They revealed intense debates about law, purity, calendars, authority, interpretation, community, and the end of days. Scholars often connect many Qumran texts with a Jewish sect, frequently identified with the Essenes, although the relationship between the caves, the nearby settlement, and different groups remains debated. This discovery did not provide a secret biography of Jesus, prove modern conspiracy claims, or settle every question about biblical origins. Its importance is more substantial. The scrolls placed Judaism and the emergence of Christianity within a crowded landscape of competing ideas. They showed religious tradition being argued, copied, interpreted, and preserved by real communities. The caves did not reveal a single hidden answer. They revealed the diversity from which later religious canons emerged. The ship burial that lit the Dark Ages. In May 1939, self-taught archaeologist Basil Brown began work on the largest burial mound at Sutton Hoo in Suffolk, on land owned by Edith Pretty. Iron rivets appeared in the soil. Their pattern traced the vanished outline of a wooden ship almost 27 meters long. At its center lay a burial chamber filled with objects of extraordinary quality. The acidic soil had consumed the timber and almost all direct human remains, leaving stains, impressions, metal fittings, and a chamber of grave goods. Archaeologists recovered gold and garnet dress fittings, weapons, feasting vessels, silver from the eastern Mediterranean, textiles, and the fragments of an 4. elaborate helmet. The burial probably belonged to a powerful early 7th century ruler, with Raedwald of East Anglia often suggested, although the individual's identity cannot be proved. Before Sutton Hoo, post-Roman Britain was commonly described through the language of collapse. The phrase Dark Ages encouraged an image of isolation, poverty, and cultural decline between Rome and the later medieval kingdoms. The ship burial made that picture impossible to sustain. Its craftsmanship required highly trained specialists. Its materials and styles connected East Anglia to Scandinavia, continental Europe, the Byzantine world, and trade routes reaching much farther. The find also altered the relationship between archaeology and literature. The halls, weapons, gift-giving, kingship, and funerary splendor described in early medieval poetry such as Beowulf could no longer be dismissed as pure fantasy. Sutton Hoo did not prove the poem's events, but it showed that the social world behind its imagery had archaeological reality. The human story of the excavation mattered as well. Edith Pretty commissioned the work and later donated the treasure to the nation. Basil Brown's careful excavation preserved the ship's fragile imprint under immense pressure as professional teams arrived and war approached. Sutton, who changed history not because it revealed that everyone in early medieval England lived in luxury. It revealed the scale of political power, artistic achievement, and international connection that the label Dark Ages had concealed. The mechanical universe pulled from the sea. In 1900, sponge divers discovered an ancient shipwreck off the Greek island of Antikythera. Salvage operations brought up statues, ceramics, and a corroded mass of bronze and wood. In 1902, a scholar noticed gear teeth inside one fragment. The object would become known as the Antikythera mechanism, a machine so technically complex that it disrupted the accepted history of ancient engineering. The surviving device is incomplete and divided into dozens of fragments. Modern X-ray tomography and surface imaging have revealed at least 30 surviving bronze gears and extensive inscriptions. Built around the late 2nd century BCE, it modeled astronomical cycles. Its rear dials tracked calendrical patterns and predicted eclipses. Its gearing represented the irregular motion of the moon with remarkable mathematical sophistication. Inscriptions indicate that the front displayed the sun, moon, and the known planets within a mechanical image of the cosmos, although parts of the reconstruction remain debated. The mechanism is often called the world's oldest known analog computer. That phrase is useful if it does not suggest a modern electronic machine. It was a hand-powered calculating and display device in which gear ratios embodied astronomical knowledge. Turning a crank translated mathematical cycles into moving pointers. Its importance lies partly in absence. No earlier geared device of comparable complexity has survived. And nothing similar is preserved from the following many centuries. That gap once encouraged claims that the mechanism was impossibly advanced. A stronger conclusion is that survival is uneven. Bronze was valuable and routinely recycled. Delicate machines are less likely to endure than stone temples. The Antikythera fragments may represent a sophisticated technical tradition that archaeology has only barely sampled. The shipwreck therefore changed the history of technology. Ancient Greek science was not confined to abstract geometry and written theory. At least some artisans and scholars could transform astronomical models into precision mechanisms. The machine did not arrive from outside its culture. It emerged from the intersection of Greek geometry, Babylonian astronomical cycles, metalworking, and mechanical experimentation. What looked impossible became evidence that the ancient technological record is far more incomplete than the ancient imagination. The monuments built before farming. Göbekli Tepe rises on a limestone ridge in southeastern Turkey. The site was recorded during a survey in 1963, but its significance became clear after Klaus Schmidt began excavations in 1995. Beneath the mound were monumental round and oval enclosures built during the pre-pottery Neolithic, beginning around 9600 BCE. Their carved T-shaped pillars reached heights of several meters and carried images of snakes, boars, foxes, birds, and other wild animals. The dates were astonishing. These structures were created by communities living near the transition from hunting and gathering toward farming. Older models of social development often assumed that agriculture produced permanent villages, surplus food, hierarchy, and only then monumental ritual architecture. Göbekli Tepe showed that large communal construction appeared before fully developed farming economies. Early interpretations described the site as the world's first temple, visited by mobile hunter-gatherers who gathered for ritual and feasting. That formulation captured public attention but has become more nuanced. Excavations have identified smaller buildings and evidence that complicates a strict separation between sacred monument and settlement. The large enclosures were probably special communal spaces, but the people who built them may have lived at or near the site more consistently than first proposed. The correction does not reduce the discovery. It makes it more important. Göbekli Tepe belongs to a broader landscape of early Neolithic sites in Upper Mesopotamia where communities experimented with architecture, food production, symbolism, memory, and collective labor. The pillars reveal organization on a scale once thought impossible for hunter-gatherers. Yet they do not prove that religion single-handedly invented agriculture, that the carvings record a lost zodiac, or that a forgotten advanced civilization designed the site. Those claims go beyond the evidence. What Göbekli Tepe changed was the direction of the question. Archaeologists could no longer treat monuments as a simple result of settled agricultural life. Collective building, ritual gathering, and social competition may have helped drive people toward new forms of settlement and food production. Civilization did not unfold through one universal sequence. People experimented, gathered, built, and believed before the categories in our textbooks existed. When lasers removed the jungle. In 2016, aircraft carrying LiDAR instruments surveyed more than 2,000 square kilometers of northern Guatemala. LiDAR sends laser pulses toward the ground and measures their return. Some pulses pass through gaps in forest canopy, allowing researchers to model the surface below. When the vegetation was digitally removed from the data, the Maya landscape appeared at a scale archaeologists had never seen. The survey identified more than 60,000 structures, including houses, platforms, roads, terraces, canals, reservoirs, fortifications, and monumental buildings. These were not all occupied at the same moment, and LiDAR cannot date a wall or identify its function without fieldwork. But the pattern forced a major reassessment. Northern Guatemala had supported denser populations, more intensive landscape engineering, and more extensive networks than traditional ground surveys had revealed. The discovery changed the unit of archaeological attention. A temple or palace can be excavated as an isolated monument. LiDAR exposed relationships among cities, farms, roads, defensive systems, and modified wetlands. It showed that Maya urbanism was not simply a collection of ceremonial centers separated by empty jungle. In many regions, the forest covered a heavily managed landscape. The findings also challenged two persistent stereotypes, that tropical environments prevented large, complex societies, and that Maya political life was relatively peaceful. Fortifications and strategic defenses. 6. Pointed to organized conflict, while terraces and water systems indicated large investments in feeding and sustaining populations. The Maya were not a vanished mystery people. Their descendants remain across the region, and archaeology increasingly works with local communities whose knowledge and heritage are inseparable from the sites. LiDAR does not replace excavation. It produces possible features that must be checked on the ground. It compresses centuries of construction into one surface model and can create false positives. Its power comes from combining remote sensing with excavation, environmental evidence, inscriptions, and community knowledge. The laser survey changed history because it revealed how much archaeological interpretation had been shaped by what researchers were physically able to see. Sometimes the lost city was not lost. The jungle had simply hidden the scale of the landscape around it. What the greatest discoveries really change. The Rosetta Stone opened a language. Pompeii preserved the structure of ordinary urban life. Altamira. Restored imagination to Paleolithic people. Neanderthal bones expanded the human family, and ancient DNA dissolved the clean boundary between them and us. Tutankhamun's tomb preserved a royal burial system and transformed archaeology into global spectacle. The Dead Sea Scrolls revealed the diversity behind sacred traditions. Sutton, who replaced darkness with connection. The Antikythera mechanism exposed a missing history of precision technology. Göbekli Tepe disrupted the expected sequence from farming to monuments. LiDAR turned a jungle of isolated ruins into a Maya landscape crowded with infrastructure and political life. None of these discoveries produced a final version of the past. Each created new disputes. Hieroglyphs could be read, but interpretation continued. Pompeii could be excavated, but every excavation changed the site. Neanderthal DNA answered one question and opened hundreds more. Göbekli Tepe overturned an old model, then forced archaeologists to revise the first model that replaced it. That pattern is the real lesson. Archaeology is not a hunt for objects that confirm what we already believe. At its best, it is a disciplined encounter with evidence that resists us. The past does not survive evenly. Stone outlasts wood. Elites leave monuments more often than laborers leave biographies. Dry caves preserve manuscripts that humid climates destroy. Colonial institutions have often decided which discoveries became famous, while local knowledge, workers, landowners, and descendant communities were pushed to the margins of the story. The phrase archaeological discovery can therefore be misleading. A place may be known to local people long before it enters an academic record. An object may be excavated decades before technology reveals what it does. A skeleton may sit in a collection until DNA gives it a second history. Discovery is often not a single dramatic moment. It is a chain of recognition. The finds that changed history forever did not make the past simpler. They made it larger, less linear, and more human. They showed that writing can return after 1,000 years of silence, that art can survive the collapse of memory, that machines can outlive the technical traditions that made them, and that whole civilizations can remain visible only as faint changes in the ground. So the most important question is not which treasure deserves to be called the greatest. It is this: which certainty about our own history is still waiting for one fragment, one translation, or one new method to prove it wrong?